Alright everybody, we are going to do a little video on spacers when it comes to vehicles. I know a bunch of people have done these. You can get on forums and look it up, and a bunch of people say, oh, I've never run spacers. There's no way I'm going to do that. Then you got other people saying, I've ran spacers for 20, 30, 40, 50,000 miles or more and never had an issue. So that's kind of what we're here to talk about. Is there good things about spacers? Yes. Can there be bad things about spacers? Yes. And most of those things can be taken care of based on just putting them on the vehicle correctly, what kind of spacers you choose to buy, and basically how you treat your stuff and kind of how it will hold up. So for me, I do have a bad experience whenever it comes to spacers, but I can't really blame it on the spacers. So here's the story. I went to go buy, this has been quite a few years ago, I was going to buy a Tahoe that had a little bit of a lift on it, wheels and tires, and it had 2-inch spacers on it. So I went down, vehicle checked out, I bought it, and I was driving it home with really no issues whatsoever. We were actually heading to a camp spot, so as we got close, I noticed something felt a little weird, so I slowed down, and the lugs had started to basically snap off of the spacer because they started to get loose. So they got loose, started to wobble, and then it started breaking off, breaking off the lugs that were there. So could it have turned out very bad? Definitely. I was driving home on the interstate, it could have broke then, and it could have been very, very bad things. So they can be very dangerous if you don't use them right. So make sure you take your time if you're putting them on. They're torqued to the right spec, things like that, so that obviously your safety is the most important thing. Otherwise, if it was all about, that conversation, are they safe? If you do them properly, they're safe. Otherwise, I wouldn't be running them on both of these trucks. And then we also run them on the show build. And I've ran them on other vehicles that I've had, and so far have had no issues. The show build's one thing. If you're not comfortable towing with it, totally understand. The show build, we ended up towing the fifth wheel camper that we have with it. Cole took that camping and didn't have an issue towing with the 26x14s on 33s on 2-inch spacers. You've seen a few clips of the silver Denali hooked up to a trailer, a flatbed with a loader on it, with a razor on it, or a couple four-wheelers and stuff like that. So not that I tow things that are super heavy, but some weight there, towing on 2-inch spacers on those 14 wides, and I have not had a single issue doing that either. The Cheyenne, I can't hardly include it in the topic because it doesn't really pull trailers, and if it would, it wouldn't be a heavy trailer. So I do run spacers on it, and I'll kind of show you how they look on each one of these setups, because that's really why I choose to run them. Is it gets your stance out there farther, so that to me it looks the way you want it to look. You want a mean, aggressive stance. Sometimes that spacer is needed if you're running maybe you're only running a 10 wide or a 12 wide wheel and you need it to stick out a little farther. It's a cheaper alternative than going and buying 14 wides. Well, maybe you bought 14 wides, and what do you know, you still want to put 2-inch spacers on like I did on my truck. You can still do that and get that aggressive stance and still be safe. So we'll go over and take a look at both of these trucks and what it basically turns them into with the spacers on it. And the spacers that I'm running, as long as you pretty much get good strength on what you're getting. I think I did buy mine off eBay or Amazon or something. They weren't super expensive. I didn't go with the Borla or Bora spacers, whichever one they are, that are super expensive, because that gets really high. But as long as your strength is there on the steel that is used, that builds them, that the lugs are made of, that's where your strength really comes in. So as long as you pay attention to that, and then don't obviously get over that max rating for whatever they are, you're going to be just fine. And as long as they seat all the way in and flat, and your lugs on your truck don't stick out past them. A lot of people do that. They will put the spacer on, and maybe it's not a 2-inch spacer. Maybe they don't want to go that far and they want to stick an 1.5 inch spacer on there. If you just do an 1.5 inch spacer, your stock lugs on your truck are going to stick out past that spacer. Ergo, when you put the wheel on, the wheel is coming in and touching the head of your stock struts that are coming out, your stock lugs that are coming out. So needless to say, you tighten that up. That's what a lot of people do, and then it's not sitting on a flat surface. They come loose, stuff breaks. People have bad reputation when it comes to spacers if they do it that way. So make sure they sit all the way flat on what you're attaching them to when your wheel goes on, and that'll help you out a lot. So let's look at these trucks and kind of see what the spacers got us to, and the benefit of having them. All right, here, so we'll start off with the Cheyenne. Every vehicle is different as far as their stance is concerned. This is a 12 wide wheel on a 1250 tire, and that's all the stance that's there. The back doesn't quite stick out as much. I'm running a 3-inch spacer on the back, which technically, to make it even, you would run a 4 on the back and a 2 on the front on this truck, because that's how different they are going from the rear axle to the front. But that's the stance on a 12 wide with a 1250 tire and a 2-inch spacer. So really doesn't stick out that much, in my opinion. So you can imagine if I didn't have that 2-inch spacer on there, it would have pretty much no stance at all. Probably pretty flush with the fender. So if we look in here, that's you see the spacer sitting right there. So I put these on, tightened them up good whenever I put them on, and have not had them back off. Go back here and look at this one. You can obviously see it's a little wider. That's the front of it there, and then the back of it's over there. And yeah, they've been holding up fairly well. First time I've ever ran 3-inch spacers on anything. I really think that's starting to push it, especially on this old truck. With what you're attaching it to, it's a little bitty thread that comes out of that axle, because it's just such an old truck and it wasn't rated for a lot of weight. Or maybe it's just because I'm looking at it compared to my big truck. But yeah, but it's held up fine. I've put, I don't know, 400 or 500 miles on this truck and haven't really had any issues. So that's kind of the exception with this truck. It hasn't been driven a lot with the spacers and stuff on it. Drove it to a few local towns, drove it down to Mother Road Mayhem. But yeah, that's it. It held up good. It goes down the road well. I mean, kind of, for my opinion, the wider the stance gets, the better control the vehicle has. So, and then here is our big truck, and then that's the stance that it has with 14 wides on 33 1450 tires. And I don't even know if you can see the spacers in here. You kind of can see part of them. There's not really much to look at. Everyone knows what a spacer looks like. You've seen us put them on before. But that's the look that it gives you. And this truck's been put through it pretty good. I've pulled quite a few trailers with it. I don't necessarily take it easy on it. I drove this truck on a vacation trip down to Texas. I've been driving this truck since it was pretty much new on these spacers. And what do we have? Let's see. A little over 5,000 miles on the truck, and I've not had an issue with running these spacers. So that's about all I'll say. I mean, it's ultimately your choice if you want to run 2-inch spacers or not on your truck. Like I said, is it just to get the stance that you want? Maybe you have a 12 wide and you want it to stick out a little farther. Maybe you just want to get it out there as far as possible and push the limits of your truck. That's great too. So hopefully this helped you a little bit on controversy, whether you like or dislike spacers. As I said, there can be bad things about them, but there can be good things too. I don't know, as far as it goes, whenever it comes to towing really heavy things, what your outcome would be. But I've towed some decently heavy things. I mean, obviously nothing that would at all get close to maxing out a big truck like that. But for what I tow, what I use my truck for, it's enough that I feel comfortable with. It's safe, in my opinion. I have not had any issues running them on the trucks that I have. So for you guys, you have to make your choice, whether it's worth it or not, to go ahead and go with spacers or not. And if you do, just take your time, do it the proper way, do your research, make sure you're not going to overload your truck with whatever spacers maybe put on there, whatever it's rated for. But normally they're rated for the vehicle they're going to go on, unless you just really get some cheapo stuff. So I would just recommend be smart with what you do, and if you do that, running any kind of spacer is going to be just fine. In my experience, 2-inch spacers have caused me no trouble. The 3-inch on the back of the Cheyenne have caused me no trouble. I can't really say anything on any other sizes outside that because I haven't really ran them. So there's my 2 cents on that, and I hope you guys like the video.